Well, hello everyone, welcome and thank you so much for being here today. This is part of our Research for the Public Good Conference 2022. This is an annual within APUS research conference that we have been doing for several years now. And our goal is to highlight and showcase research going on at the university and hopefully provide some good collaboration and collegiality for each other as we're continuing to move forward with research interests and those pursuits. So this morning, our topic is working with student researchers, and I have a really excellent panel here of faculty members to discuss their experiences with you. We have Doctors Michelle Watts, Kristen Miller, and Adrienne Herrenbrook all here to talk about projects that they are currently working on that are involving working with students. So we're going to start off with kind of a panel discussion format and try to keep this a bit informal. So as we're going, if you have questions and you want to come off of mute and ask them or pop them in the chat, we'll try to answer as we go. I do have some slides that I could bring up a bit later to show some resources, but for the time being, we'll just stick with conversation and we'll see how that goes timing wise to bring those slides up a little bit later. So the first thing that I'd like to do is just have our panelists introduce themselves and give just a little bit of a snapshot of the type of project that you're working on that's been including students. And if it's okay, I'll start with Michelle Watts and then go to Kristen and then to Adrienne.
Sure. So I'm Michelle Watts, and I'm the assistant chair for the Global Security Department. And the project I'm working on now is we have a grant that is a comparative case study of Indigenous groups and the impact of the pandemic on them and the ways that they have kind of proactively helped themselves during the pandemic. So this has been really interesting to work with students because we have, I've worked with students in the past to varying degrees, but this is probably the biggest team of students we've ever had. We have a doctoral student, a master's student, an undergraduate student, and then a couple other students that are working on literature that I don't recall offhand if I think they're master's students as well. So some of them have been involved in field research. Two of them traveled with us and were, with us during interviews, not doing them by themselves at this point. And the rest have been working to varying degrees on helping to collect data. So it's been really interesting and also a lot to manage.
Thank you so much. Kristen, I'm going to turn it right over to you to talk about your projects.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks, Jenny. Thanks for the chance to be here. I'm Kristen Miller. I'm a professor in the Space Studies Department, and I work with students in a couple of different groups in the department. The first one is a telescope project where we use telescope data and we look for supernovae. We also look at some exoplanets. That's a group of probably varies between 10 to 15 students who are active at any one time. They're divided into two teams, and each team has a student leader. And we have both graduate and undergraduate in that program. It's open to anyone in space studies. And then the second project is kind of a larger project. It's called the Analog Research Group. And in the Analog Research Group, we prepare student teams. They're typically between 4 and 7 students to travel to analog facilities. We have one that we partner with in North Dakota, and we also are currently partnering with one in Arizona, the Mars Society, and also in Florida, which is Aquarius Reef Base. And so we have students working both as teams, crews, and then we have students working as the planning staff who are preparing the schedules and providing mission support for each group. And that one has, we've got, our active count is probably somewhere around 30 in that group.
Thank you so much. And Adrienne, you want to jump on and tell us about your project?
Yes, and I apologize. This is the first Zoom meeting I've ever not been able to see my video. I'm so sorry. But my name is Adrienne Herrenbrook. I am an associate professor in sports and health sciences. I'm currently working on a project with actually an alum of our graduate program, and we're focusing on the impact of hypoxic breathing during training. So there's a lot of research out there about the benefits of exercising and strength training in hyperbaric situations. So even at altitude or in using like an oxygen mask or in hyperbaric chambers. But there have been lots of really interesting studies on that, but that's not accessible to a lot of people. So what we're trying to do is figure out a way that people can use that technology when they don't have a lot of money or a lot of resources. And so we're using a technique that we've been working with to mimic that hyperbaric atmosphere using hypoxic breathing. So we're using certain breathing techniques during exercise that actually brings the SpO2 down, which sounds dangerous, but it actually shows a lot of benefits for both strength gain and improved body composition. So really exciting stuff, and apologize again for the video not working.
That's okay. My camera was finicky this morning too. I think it's a Monday. So I guess I'll start off, since all of you are kind of working with different numbers of people and different kind of compositions of the group, and ask how you identify students to work with and recruit them in. And I realize it's a bit different probably across these projects, so that might be a good thing to start with. And Kristen, if you'd like to kick us off on that, I think that would be great.
Absolutely. So for our Supernova group, my goal was to have a project that was open to all space studies students. So in space studies, we have a lot of students. We have very little full-time faculty members. We only, when I started the group, in fact, there were only 3 full-time faculty members total, and we have a few more now from the Earth side, but we're still very small numbers. And so I really felt it was important for every student to have the chance to do a little bit of research and to at least touch telescope data during their time. So for that one, we recruit across the board. We send out, we ask the faculty, who have been really great and supportive, to put announcements in their courses. Midweek announcements is what we usually use, where we get our Gmail account out there, and then the students will anyone interested will send, email us, and we have a training coordinator in the group who monitors our Gmail account and brings them in and gets them trained and put on a team. So that one is absolutely, excuse me, open to all. And in the analog research group, it's actually a multidisciplinary effort. So we use similar recruitment methods. We also do a lot of social media recruiting within the university, but we've been branching out for all of STEM. We're trying to involve communications now. We've been working with Dr. Mercer on that, as well as Dr. Little in management, and Dr. Kane in the psychology group, to kind of broaden our reach, because space research is multidisciplinary, and there's opportunities for those students as well. So right now it's pretty open. When you come into the analog group, it's a little bit more constrained. There's an entrance interview with our program manager, who is one of our space studies graduate students, and he kind of figures out where, looking at the interest of the student as well as their strengths and their time commitment, kind of figures out where they might be best suited and slots them into those positions. So that's kind of how we've done it so far.
Well, thank you. That's a really good example of very broad reach. I'm going to come back to Adrienne, if that's okay, working with this student who's now an alum. How did you identify this student or alum, Adrienne?
Yeah, sure. Mine's way less organized than what Kristen was discussing. So actually, I got in touch with this alum. She had reached out interested in doing some kind of research. She has her own business, which is just a really interesting story. I love the collaboration of working with our past graduates. I'm interested specifically in working with graduate students, and I've done a lot of muscle phys research in the past. And so she reached out to our department, and I got in touch with her that way. So I have to put it was on her to begin with, which was awesome that she even felt comfortable reaching out to our department and getting involved. And from there, we've just kind of grown a small team. We do collaborate with another institute, a small university in New York that we work with to do some of the hands-on assessments. They have a lab there where we collaborate with some of them to do things like DEXA and some strength measurements and stuff like that. So it's been really exciting. We're hoping to grow this. This is the first time we've actually worked together, and we're hoping to grow this over the next few years. My long-term vision would be to utilize, which I'm sure y'all are all familiar with, the grad hubs that each of our departments have. We have a grad hub for our graduate students. And on that, we have bios of all of our faculty members. And the long-term plan is to really use that area to kind of spur some ideas for our graduate students to link up with the appropriate faculty, just like you would in a traditional, on-campus university. In a graduate program, you get linked with a faculty advisor and work on some research like that. So we're hoping to get some research groups going with that. And that's my goal. Working with an alum has been awesome, though. She's very, this specific alum is very, eager and has a lot of, we think, good background since she came from us. So.
Yeah, thank you. And for those of you who haven't heard of what a grad hub is, this is something that School of Health Sciences has been doing in conjunction with their faculty advising effort to have kind of a central site that all the students in the program can be enrolled in at the same time and that they can keep throughout the program. And that is a good place to try to familiarize students with more faculty and maybe do some recruiting. I'll come over to Michelle with your research group. Michelle, how did you identify and bring in these students?
So first, Christy Drexler worked with some of the students in the STEM network to put together like a really fantastic announcement, explaining what we're looking for, the different positions, which could either be, actually going to the field or just doing research behind the scenes. And then we posted those both in our student groups, the honor society I work with, which is related to international relations, and the STEM honor societies, as well as some courses. And doing it that way, we got a really good response. And then we had an interview process. So not everyone was selected, and some, kind of dropped out in the process depending on their obligations. But making sure that we had like a Zoom interview with everyone was very helpful to kind of connect with them and, see their level of interest and commitment.
Thank you. And Oliver, I see your question. I'll come back to that one about the doctoral students. When I was kind of corresponding with our panelists ahead of time, all three of them really brought up setting expectations for the students' involvement in the projects and what they would be doing. So I'm going to ask for a little more elaboration on that point in terms of how you set expectations and what kinds of specific responsibilities those students are doing. And Michelle, you kind of hinted at that before, so I might have you lead off here since you do have some students in different roles, it sounds like.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the trickiest parts, is kind of setting clear expectations, but also being flexible, realizing that these are all students with, of course, a lot going on in their lives and a lot of other obligations. So one thing we do is to kind of meet frequently to talk about expectations, and also put it in writing somewhere, in email communications. We use Google Docs a lot. We found even as recently as a few weeks ago, one of the students was walking another student through how to find things in Google Docs. I mean, because even Google Docs can get kind of overwhelming, and when you have a lot going on in there. So we set milestones, but with the understanding that it's flexible, but we want to keep the lines of communication open if a student is not going to be able to, say, deliver a paragraph literature review by the date that we had talked about.
Well, thank you. I'm sure we can say more about that, but I will let Kristen chime in here about, I know you have several kind of different variations of projects going on, but how do you work with the students in setting expectations?
Yeah, I think it's so important to set expectations. And one of the things that we look at is the time commitment. So when they come on board, we have a really clear level of, here are the different roles, and here is how much time you can expect to spend per week in each role. Here's what we need. And we let the students, tell us what they can do, basically. We know our students are busy, they're working adults, they have military commitments and families. And so, we don't want to put someone in a position where they're not going to be successful. So we look really hard at time commitments. And then one of the other things that I've found is really helpful in keeping track, I guess, keeping progress, making sure that we're all on track, making sure people are still active, is to have weekly meetings. We do them in both groups at the planning staff level. And, sometimes for some groups it's weekly, for some groups it's monthly, but it's a time for them to come on board and to say, okay, here's what I'm doing with my team. Here's where we are. These are the, hiccups that we've run into. These are the issues we're having. And, and so we can kind of brainstorm it as a group and figure out who can help and who can, support if support is needed. Because, ultimately, I think that for all of us, the goal is, one, for the research to be successful, but two, for these students to have a really successful research experience. And, that doesn't happen if you're, not meeting the goals and feeling like you're failing. And so we try really hard to make sure that we are setting them up for success and giving them the support that they need with that.
Thanks. Thank you. And over to you, Adrienne, as you've been working with this alum.
Yeah, sure.
Set that up?
I'm going to echo a lot of the same things. Expectations. We can't this is on me. I'm talking about myself. I can't do a good job if I don't know what a good job means. And I think that just making that very clear of, this is what we expect, not me as like the leader of the project, but as these are our goals, and we have to have these expectations moving forward if we want to reach those goals. So definitely weekly meetings or some sort of consistent check-in, as well as what Michelle said about having it in writing about what everyone's doing. I think that's really important. Something that I think is important from the get-go is to identify the, and I'm going to say individuals, because I work with an alum, but we are also collaborating with a couple of professionals in the field. We need to identify, we sat down and identified everyone's strengths at the beginning. Some people have strengths in working, we're working with participant facing situations where they were actually talking to participants of the study, walking them through these workouts and stuff like that. Some people do better with, working with Qualtrics and SurveyMonkey or whatever it is, data collection. So even though they may not have had specific experience doing what we're going to do in this study, I think identifying strengths really helps them to take ownership of whatever their role is. And when we can identify the role and they take ownership of it, all of a sudden they come up with the expectations. Well, I want to get all of this done by this date. And then I want to get this done. And it's really cool because we're all kind of taking ownership of our piece of the puzzle. And at the end, it's, somehow we do this study together. It's pretty awesome. So I think identifying strengths and then providing, and this is kind of getting off the expectations, but providing resources to help them excel in those strengths. So if we are working with someone who's really good at, working with organization on stats and the data collection and stuff like that. So giving them the tools of appropriate software that's going to make their job easier, or how to communicate with each other, how to keep track of all the moving parts. I think that's really helpful, and it helps us to each keep our own expectations for whatever it is that we're trying to do. So I think I got a little off topic, but at the end, if we don't know what our role is, we can't identify what we need to do. So we need to identify our role, identify the tasks, and then have some sort of a system of checking in to make sure that we're all getting the assistance we need to make those tasks possible.
And I can add something here if that's okay. Adrian, just what you were saying made me think, identifying strengths is really important. So we had, some students will just really volunteer things that you might not have thought of. For example, we are doing interviews, so we are dealing with consent forms, and the paper consent forms are a pain, and it is a pain, especially if you're doing a virtual interview. Well, one of our students just put the consent form into a DocuSign document. That was something that, I had never done before, didn't know how to do. And I use that all the time. So that's just been like a bonus that was really helpful. There was one person I had sent the consent form, just the electronically, told her, you don't have to print it out, and just was not getting it back. I sent the link to her, got it back right away. So that's just one of those things that made me think of working with people's strengths. And, sometimes they volunteer to do things that just surprise you.
That's a great comment. And I think I like the direction Adrian went there, because in bringing these students in to work on specific tasks, building on their strengths is obviously important, but you might also have to provide them some extra training or resources or professional development to be able to do the tasks that you ultimately need for this project. Would one of you like to start off talking about what kind of background or training have you had to work with in order to bring the students up to speed? Kristen, you want to lead off on that one?
Sure, yeah, I will. I think it's really important to meet the students where they are and then help them to get to where they need to be. And we have a couple of things that we've done with that. And, we do have in both programs some a training coordinator position, which is someone who has been with the program long enough to understand the process and what they need to do. And they've put together some different training videos, which you can watch asynchronously. And then they also, we've found that's not enough, really. It's a good start, but it's not enough. Those are actually there more for after you've been trained personally, and then you can use those as a reference to, review and get back up to speed. But really, our training coordinator meets with each new person and walks them through the process. And that's really, especially with the projects that are dealing with telescope data, that's really valuable, because no matter how much experience these students have, none of them have touched telescope data before. So that's just across the board, a new experience for all of them as they come in. And our training coordinators have done a fantastic job of being able to do that. It does work to do it in a small group. I will say they can do a Zoom meeting with with like 3 new people at once and walk them all through the process. But we're finding that just having the asynchronous training isn't enough with that. Our training coordinator is a huge role. And one other thing that we've done that's been really successful is we've created a research coordination team, which is a group of students who is familiar with the steps of research. So they may not be familiar with each project that we're looking at, but they know, first you need to, do your literature review, and they know how to connect with the librarians and how to use Truffy Library and Google Scholar. And, and then second, they know, you need to come up with a procedure, you need to come up with your materials, and they know these steps. And so they meet, again, we assign them one-on-one to the new crew members, and each one, like, usually, I think they usually do it over text, honestly, but they may have a couple of Zoom meetings in there as well. But they just kind of text their person and say, okay, what stage are you at? And, how can we get you to this next stage? What do you need? And we find, they can run interference for any questions that come up, and just kind of provide general materials for support. So they have access to template consent forms. I love the DocuSign idea, Michelle. I'm gonna suggest that, because that's way better. But they have they have, template quad charts. We use a lot of quad charts for our ideation and just, a lot of things like that. And so they can say, okay, you're having this problem. Here are these resources. And it helps to get them to the next step. And it keeps me from having to meet with everyone individually every week, which would be completely unmanageable. So they've done a great job. And it's really valuable for those students because they now are so familiar with the process of research that they're prepared to go forward and do. I think they can do anything on their own now. So we're really proud of them.
Thank you. And Oliver had a question that I'll open up to anyone. How do you not scare the students off from the process? Michelle or Adrian, do you want to chime in on that?
Chime in. I don't know. Mine's a little different because I am working with a graduate student / alum. So they're very self-motivated. But one thing that I think is really giving them ownership. Like I know that they're going to have to learn a lot, but when they think it is, when they know it's their study, all of a sudden they are very excited, even with the challenges. And I don't know, Kristen and Michelle can probably speak to this a lot more as they've worked with more students, but I've seen that several times that because they're driving the ship, so to speak, they're ready to face the challenges that come up. And of course, they know that they're going to have, we're always there meeting with them weekly, meeting with them, monthly, whenever it is. So they're going to get that consistent place to ask questions, place to say, I need help with this. That's one thing that I always try to do too, is research is literally, we're all just trying to figure this out. We're all unsure of what we're doing because we're asking something no one's ever asked before. And so I think if we can demystify research a little bit, that really helps from the scared process. I think a lot of students come into the research environment thinking, it's a fancy, very professional, which it is professional, but I don't mean to make it non-important, but it is. We're all just asking questions and we're figuring it out as we go. And as long as we can follow that process that Kristen was talking about, we're going to come up with challenges and we'll be able to answer those questions as we come. So I think giving them ownership and then also letting them know, I don't know what the answer to that is. Let's figure this out. I think that can be really helpful, but I'm sure they can speak specifically maybe to their initial process a little bit more than I can.
Adrian, I really love how you put that because, sometimes research is messy and just, I think having the students in on the meetings, we had some long meetings. We were just hammering out the survey questions, our interview questions, and sometimes we might spend half an hour, debating a certain one, and then we might test it out and say, no, let's change that, depending on, what happened in the field or what happened when we were, doing kind of a test case. But, in our case, working with human subjects, there's really a lot of training involved, which kind of speaks to your question, Oliver. Just going through the human subject research training, that can rule out a lot of students right there if they're not willing to commit the time, because it takes students anywhere from 8 to, I think someone said it took them like 24 hours, not continuously, you can go back to it, but it's a big time commitment. So one way that I try to, I think a little bit of healthy fear is good, because it's not easy. It is a big commitment to be involved in that. But, like you said, working with them, I'm kind of reassuring them, we had a great opportunity when we were in New Mexico recently, just to sit with our student, in person and go over like how to code an interview. And we just sat, for an hour or two and talked about different points and, debated different things and went through it. So, so that was great, but it does take quite a bit of training and reinforcement. And we had another student who, sent me an interview she coded, like on a Sunday afternoon. She's like, oh, I don't know if this is any good. And when I saw that come in, I thought, I need to give her some feedback right away and let her know that, look at it, let her know that she's on the right track. And, I think that kind of feedback and input is really helpful.
I so agree with both Michelle and Adrian. I think I think you guys have said it so well. The only thing I would add is just to build a little bit on Michelle's last point, that the positive feedback is so important, no matter what a student has done and no matter how far it may be from what, maybe I had in my head, there is good there. And you can recognize, if nothing else, their effort and their, the fact that they followed through and they came up with something and they created something for you, that's important, right? That's a first step, and that's good. So one thing I really try to do is to recognize that as much as possible. And it's hard when you get busy and you're just like, okay, great, that piece is done. Yes, let's do the next one, but it's really important to stop and to just say, let's look at how well this was, let's look at the strengths that are in here. And then, and then here are some places where we can where we need a little bit more, but to recognize I find to recognize publicly as well as privately. We have some, general Slack channels that are associated with our research groups where the students can chatter. And I try to put a lot of positive individualized feedback in there and just be like, hey guys, shout out to this person who has done this. And I try to make sure I'm, over time hitting everyone, but, just to recognize their enthusiasm, to recognize their effort, to recognize what is done well. The other thing we've been talking a lot about in the analog research group is the culture of failure. We're trying to kind of develop a culture of failure where when we as leadership have not provided something they need, we're quick to use that word because we want to take the negative connotation away from it. We want it to be something we use in conversation, and that it's something that we build on and grow from, and not something that means, oh, I failed and I have to leave now and, in shame or something, which it's not. I mean, failure is, something that we use. And, my project manager says all the time, no one succeeds at everything. We all fail. And so he and I have been really trying in our comments, to use that word and to say, wow, guys, we really failed here. We didn't provide you this information that you needed. And we really appreciate you pointing that out. And here's the information. Now we can do better in the future. And we're trying to model that so that when we do give them feedback and say, hey, we really needed this information here, these things were great, but this needs to change. It's not, this big deal. It's just, hey, here's something to improve on, and they can move for that. We do have some students in the group who are really sensitive to any kind of critical feedback at all, and any kind of, this wasn't quite the way it needs to be. And so we're trying to kind of, take the stigmatism out of that by being open about it, and by, discussing it and acknowledging when there is a lack at any level in the program, and especially, I think, from us, so that they can see that we're growing and learning from the process as well. So we're working on it. We're hoping to see some changes with that and some positive. It's a process. I don't know if we're there yet, but it's a process that we're really trying to emphasize. Yeah.
Well, thank you. And it sounds like all of your projects, you've really touched on the culture of the team, creating a positive team culture and trying to work through the research process in a way that is iterative and, helps all the researchers on the team with that sort of the unknowns, the fact that this is an open question that you're researching because you don't know the answer to, and that you don't always know how the process is going to turn out or what you're going to find from it. I would say, let's talk a little bit more just in general. If you have other lessons learned that have come through, through this process or your previous projects over time, involving students, are there any other nuggets that you'd like to offer here to other faculty who maybe are just thinking about this for the first time, or wanting to write a research grant for our faculty research grants and incorporate a student researcher into that project? What kinds of advice could you give them as they're kind of getting started at the beginning of the process?
Yeah, I would just say a couple things is, one, having that kind of video interview with a person to discuss expectations. And then the other thing that I think is really important is to have those signed agreements. Grad Studies has those templates, but so that you do have, in a formal agreement, what your expectations are, and that they have kind of signed off on, different kind of like like the honor code, I think, of the university, and behavioral codes, and things like that. Just having those kind of basics in place. And then, of course, you need reminders as you go on.
Yeah, one thing that we haven't touched on that I want to bring up, because it's something that I've encountered several times over the past couple of years, and that I think at the beginning I wasn't as good at, and we're really trying to improve on, is just having a very clear expectation on the way that the students interact with each other and the language that is used, especially because we use Slack rooms where we have channels where they are doing official research and conversations, and then we have general channels where which are positive. A lot of mentoring goes on there. A lot of team building happens there, but you can also get some really borderline inappropriate comments there, and borderline inappropriate use of language. We have had instances where one student has felt offended by something someone else said. And, that's of course never something that you want in a research group. And I think it's, I think it's actually inevitable. If you have, the larger your student group, I think the more frequently things like that come, just because sometimes people aren't thinking about what they say before they say it. And especially in a written medium, things can be taken the wrong way, or, unintentional offense can be given, or sometimes possibly intentional offense, hard to say. But, so I think one thing I've learned is that I have to monitor those continually. When I check my emails in the morning, I check the Slack channels, and I check them frequently throughout the day, because I want to, if anything is posted that I feel is, even close to that line, I want to take that post down and talk to that person individually and privately immediately to stop something from happening. But I also, at the beginning, when people come in, we have a specific code of conduct that talks about Slack and about the conversations they have. And, and we try to be very clear on that, because we want to be inclusive. We want this to be a place where no one feels like, we want it to be safe. I'll just say that. We want it to be a safe place where everyone would feel welcome. And the other thing I would say is that, if you're starting off with your research group, to think hard about a diversity in your recruiting methods and how you can reach a wide range, because if we just look at the demographics of the university, at least in STEM, our demographics are not very diverse, to be honest. And that's true in all of our classes. We're getting better, but we're not there yet. We have a lot of different factions which are underrepresented. And so if they're underrepresented in your student body, it's really easy for them to be underrepresented in your research as well, because this is just the people that we're recruiting from. But it doesn't have to be that way, right? You can have recruitment that's targeted for people of different genders, different ethnic backgrounds, different all the different diversities, and you can make a real effort to include everyone and to make it a place where everyone can be valued. So that's one thing that I think is really important to think about at the beginning of a research project when you are building it.
Adrienne, did you want to add on there?
Yeah. So I, again, have a little bit different experience. I think the encouragement I want to give is to anyone who hasn't started, it can start very small. I have been at the university for 2 years, almost exactly now. And, I'm working with 3 people in addition to myself. So I aspire to be like Kristen and Michelle one day and have lots of things going. but it hasn't happened yet, and that's okay. And to Jenny's point about a grant, one thing I would say is to include your student from the beginning. Let them walk through the grant process with you. I find that really important, especially if you work with a graduate student. They need to understand that writing a grant is a process. Writing, for if you're working with human subjects, going through the IRB process, my entire team was with me that whole time. They saw the comments from the IRB. They helped me, tweak a few things, give a little bit more information. All of this is in the best interest of our participants, to make sure that all of our participants are protected. And we need to make sure that our students that we're working with and everyone on our research team is all on board on making sure that we're meeting the expectations of the IRB. And I think just from an educational standpoint, at the end of the day, my goal in a research group is to have some of these students move on and potentially make their own research group, or to continue to build upon this as they move forward from the university. And they need to understand the process from start to finish. So kind of going back to what Kristen was talking about, just the research process, she has someone walk through that. I think although it can start with literature review and some of those steps, it can also start as early as, well, we have a grant submission deadline and we can't do anything without money. So how do we get this grant together? What's the information we need to have before we even get started? So I think including them on that process is really helpful. Whatever that may look like, it's going to look varying degrees of being invested, but at least just having them understand what's going on, having them understand the timeline and the work that you put in before you even get started, I think is important, because then they see that, we're collecting data right now, post-test data from our subjects. Well, we were working over a year ago on our grant, so I think it's just good to, from that beginning, to let the students be a part of that process, whatever that looks like. I also think once you get started with this and have the agreement with the student and all of those things, it's important, although we're giving ownership to them, and I think everyone knows this, but I think it's just important to remember, as the quote unquote, PI or leader of the group, that it is up to me to make sure that things keep rolling. So I think just starting with those expectations up front, as far as here's the process, and then I'm meeting you every week to ask questions. It's got to keep rolling. Even though I'm putting the onus on the student to do certain tasks, it's really, the coordinator that kind of keeps this going and keeps that conversation. So I don't know. I think including them from the very beginning, it has been really successful for me so far. And don't be afraid to start small.
Well, thank you. I'm going to recap a couple of things as we're coming up towards the end of our formal time here. And please feel free, if you have questions you haven't asked, to type them in, or you can come off mute. Kelsey, a little bit farther up in the chat, had put a link to one of our Faculty Connect pages that contains the documentation for creating a memo of understanding for student researchers. And that's something that we ask for research teams to do, especially if you're applying for our internal faculty research grant funding. And that goes through a lot of the things that our three panelists have talked about in terms of roles and tasks in the project, potential time commitment, the data ownership and who gets to use the data for different purposes, what roles and responsibilities the student may have. So we have a template for that, which is at least a way to get started, and happy to work with you more on that. As folks have noted here, if you are thinking about one of our faculty research grants, which are due November 15th for the 2023 cycle, you can write in expenses towards a student researcher. And you heard from Michelle and from everyone, actually the students have been involved in projects and did have roles where they were either going to a site or collecting data or doing different parts of the project. And it is possible to write them into one of your faculty research grants. And as Adrienne said, if you know who they are right now, involve them in that process of getting ready and seeing what it looks like to even put that together. We have lots of IRB resources. So for those of you thinking about human subjects research, yep, that's something that students would need to be aware of and work through the trainings. We have several different trainings there, both from the national level, the CITI training that you're probably aware of, and then a training module that's specific to our own IRB application that helps to walk through the different pages and fields in the IRB application and prepare people for writing that. And I'll just say one more resource that I think is really cool. I'm going to try to stick it in the chat here if I can. I might have to do it in just a sec. There is a National Office of Research Integrity, ORI, and they have put together some simulations called the lab and the research clinic. And both of those simulations are branching scenario kind of simulations, the choose your own adventure type, where people can go in and play different roles in that simulation as a grad student or as a postdoc or as a faculty member. And it goes through some different ethical dilemmas of being parts of research projects. The lab one is more traditional STEM based, and the research clinic one is a little bit more collecting research in a clinical setting, so a little more social science-y in that sense. They're both very good, and when I am able to stick the link in here in a second, I will put that in the chat so you can get it, and we can also maybe put that in our notes when we make the recording here so that you can see that as well. So as we're wrapping up, I would just say, these are fantastic examples of involving students in projects really well, really successfully, and really thoughtfully, but all three differently. So there's no one model that has to be the standard model. Please do reach out to me or to Graduate Studies if you have questions or you're thinking about something and you want to talk it through ahead of time. And we do have some of those resources that I mentioned to try to help fund the project and set expectations with your students as you go to help make that successful for you. And I see Samir wrote a comment in the chat, which is great, about having the students in the capstone write a manuscript format for their capstone document. That's really helped with getting some faculty students together for publication. So that's a really cool example too. And thank you for that, Samir. That's another way to just start building up that collaboration opportunity. So thank you to our panelists. Thank you everyone who's here today. And for those watching the recording, we really, really appreciate you being here. And please reach out as you have ideas, and we're happy to get on a call with you anytime and brainstorm to help you move forward. Thanks so much, everyone.